In 1962, Varina High School opened its doors for the first time. Long awaited and newly built, it was an exciting change for the students in the East End. Over the last 50 years, Varina has grown from a small school with 4 sports and a small student body to a large school with a large presence in its community. Let's step into the past and follow Varina's unique history through the decades and learn what it really means to be a Blue Devil. During the 60s and 70s, Varina experienced many of its firsts. It celebrated its first homecoming, had its first taste of sports victory, and crowned its first prom queen. The 60s and 70s were influential times for Varina. The students were fresh, the school was new, and the future looked bright. In the early 1960s, Varina was brand new. Its 800 students walked onto their newly constructed campus in the fall of 1962, ready for their first homecoming in their new school.
The first year I was at Varina, I got to do homecoming, and you're talking about somebody that came from a tiny Pennsylvania County school to a much bigger subdivision, although Varina wasn't as large as some of the other schools. Believe it or not, the football team elected the queen, and the princesses were elected by the senior class. And cheerleaders could not be princesses because they were cheerleaders, but they could vie for queen.
The first homecoming queen crowned on the new Varina campus was senior Rosa Salmons. In her court, she had 9 princesses.
I had the pleasure of being the person called to notify the parent if their daughter was going to be the queen, because the head football coach would give me a call and told me the boys have voted and this is who is going to be the queen. Would you contact the family to make sure the family is there? And so I would contact the family and arrange for them and where they would sit, and they just looked forward to halftime, had the crown for the principal at halftime, and the 2 football captains would come out and choose the girl and bring her over to the sideline, and the principal would then crown her.
As it approached its 10-year anniversary, Varina was thriving with almost twice the number of students it started with. The student body of 1,400 was beginning to flourish as it produced plays and plenty of drama.
In 1973, I graduated from Longwood College, and I was hired here at Varina High School to teach theater and English. In 1973, drama consisted primarily, maybe solely, of what was called the senior play, that only seniors could be in and only seniors could work on. And the first year that I was here, we did a play. The name of it was Inherit the Wind. And I remember it primarily now as having been the last senior play at Varina High School, because after that I encouraged a transition to open casting. I had to do a lot of fundraising to put on the plays here. And one of the things that my students did was to sell, I think they were like sticks of peppermint candy, and they cost small amounts of money, so that students were paying for them with pennies and nickels, and I would spend my entire plan period counting the pennies and nickels for the fundraiser. So I talked to an assistant principal about an alternative, and the assistant principal at the time suggested that I host a turkey shoot. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with turkey shoots, people bring rifles and shoot at a target. And it's funny for me to think now that the assistant principal suggested to me that I have students bring guns to, it wouldn't have been during school, this would have been an after-school event.
The 70s were a different time for Varina. Not only did the school allow smoking on campus, it even designated an area where students could smoke.
In the 70s, teachers could still smoke in faculty meetings, And I don't know if you know this, but also on campus, there was an area set aside where students could smoke. Of course, you know, that's long gone, and good for all of us that it is gone.
Varina sports have come a long way since its early years. When the school first opened, it boasted only 4 teams. That first year, the JV football team had a season record of 5-1, and the inaugural varsity baseball team finished first in the district. For the most part, however, Varina teams struggled.
We were the smallest school in Henrico County at that particular time, and everything was real close as far as our athletes were concerned, and it was a good experience. We had really good school spirit. I mean, we probably took at least 5 buses to the state championship game in Lynchburg. Now, when you consider there aren't but 300 students and you load up 5 buses, that tells you a lot of community people went as well. Back in those days, everything was really centered around high school and what was going on at the school, and as far as, you know, our students were concerned, and they followed really well.
I coached football, track, wrestling, basketball. I coached most of all of the sports in those days. We didn't have as many sports as you have today.
We only had 4 sports when I came to Varina. We only had 4 coaches, including the athletic director. We had football, boys and girls basketball, baseball, and boys track only. That was it.
During the 1966 season, the Blue Devils varsity football and basketball teams lost every game they played, mainly because the school stepped up to the Capital District in all sports. The following year was an important one in Varina history because it marked the beginning of the Varina-Highland Springs football rivalry. When the 2 schools met on the gridiron for the first time, the game ended in a tie. The teams wouldn't collide again until the 1985 season. The varsity baseball team started strong by winning the district championship in 1963. After winning a share of the 1970 district championship on a new field, the baseball team had to wait until 1979 to win another district title. The most successful Varina team of the 1970s was the gymnastics team. The Lady Devils won 5 straight Virginia State championships from 1973 to 1977 and missed a 6th by 1 point in 1978. The educational experience at Varina during the 60s and 70s was very different from today. The teachers were stricter, the technology was simpler, and courses were more varied.
In the 60s, high school was primarily teacher-based. You got lots of lectures, you took lots of notes, and you didn't talk and ask a lot of questions of the teacher. The teacher was in command of the classroom.
English at that time was very different from the way it is now because each of the teachers was asked to teach mini courses, and the mini courses lasted for 6 weeks. But we taught things that really a lot of creativity went into planning the session. I taught a class in sports and literature. Some of my colleagues taught classes on the poetry of pop music lyrics. We had several mini courses about grammar, and I think students were required to take the grammar ones. And we used a special way to teach grammar. The special way was called Chinese boxes. It was a way of diagramming sentences so that you students had a better and more complete understanding of how every part of speech operated in the sentence.
What I taught initially, I worked in the reading program from 1978 until 1987. It was called Reading Improvement. And then the county decided to get rid of all the reading programs.
As educational trends came and went, teachers relied on the technology of the time to help educate their students. But in the 60s and 70s, there were no laptops or Promethean boards in the classrooms. Instead, there were typewriters and projectors showing film strips, or, if you were lucky, 16mm films.
In the 1960s, there wasn't much technology to get lessons across to the students. There might be an overhead projector used, sometimes film strip projectors, and the very old-fashioned 16mm movie, which was normally in black and white.
To make copies of anything, teachers had to use a typewriter and put it onto something that attached to a mimeograph machine. And you literally turned a handle on the barrel of the machine, and it produced these purple inked, damp copies to hand out to students, and the ink had a powerful, almost put you to sleep smell to the ink. So I was glad actually much later to move into the computer age and not have to do copies that way.
By the 80s, Varina had been at the Messer Road location for 17 years. It had seen the 7th and 8th graders move to the new John Rolfe campus across the road and had begun to gain a legacy as a football-oriented school, all the while planting roots deeply in the rural community. Many people in Henrico County have come to know Varina as a football school in the middle of a cornfield, but it's so much more than that. Varina is a strong school with a big personality.
When I came to work here in 1984, Varina was more rural than it is now. It was not as built up as it has become over the past 15 years. And the student body was not quite as large.
We only had 2 cafeterias. We did have the same senior parking lot, that sort of thing. Clubs that were the most popular when I attended Varina, FBLA was still around. I actually worked very closely with FBLA as the president. I worked with Hicks a lot there.
Fashion is a fairly large part of a teenager's life, regardless of the era. But in the 80s and 90s, it had begun to develop into something of a lifestyle. The styles of the time not only defined the kids who wore them, but also the era as a whole.
So in the 90s, you were coming out of the 80s, and the 80s had such a definitive style to it. And so I can remember at the beginning, girls still kind of had big hair and the bright colors, but really you were moving into more of the grunge era. And so grunge was popular, and so lots of flannel shirts and hoodies, and just you were just kind of moving into a darker period, is how I would describe it.
There was a lot of heavy D, there was a lot of the hairstyles, a lot of big hair, big glasses. I'm a victim of big glasses. You know, the longer dresses, the color, everything matched. You know, the colored, you had on colored flats with the colored purse, you know, that sort of thing.
Music also defined this time in Varina history, and many of the school's former students and current staff still remember their favorite artists and bands that helped shape the school's culture.
I was a big New Kids on the Block fan, and I can remember wearing buttons that said things like, "Today is Jordan Knight's birthday," and me and my friends were just really into New Kids on the Block. And I'm a little embarrassed to say that by the end, I was a country music fan, and so I loved country music, and I think it was, for me, it was just a phase. My musical tastes have changed as an adult, but those were my high school years.
While students were jamming to their favorite musical artists, one musician was making a tangible contribution to Varina. Jimmy Dean was a country music singer and actor from Texas who moved to Virginia and took Varina under his wing. He left a mark on both the students and staff and helped the school with his kindness and generosity.
Jimmy Dean and his wife Donna were very generous to Varina High School. They gave a car to one of the top 10 seniors every year. They also gave money for jackets and gift certificates to our students who made the honor roll. And they selected 3 teachers every year and gave them a monetary reward. These were teachers that the administration felt had really done an exceptional job that particular year. And then one of the things they did when they first started taking an interest in Varina High School is the very first week of school they would invite the entire faculty to their house, and they had prepared lunch for us there. Later on, they would have Christmas parties for us. And it was really exciting because both of them would sing, Ms. Dean would play the piano. And so it was really nice to be recognized.
Varina's campus was a friendly place supported by its community. In the mid-'80s, it suddenly got some attention from the state capitol when Governor Chuck Robb decided to transform Varina from your average high school into an educational experiment.
In 1984, when I came here, the school had been selected to be the governor's school. And the school was chosen because of its unique location near the airport, central in Virginia, but also because of its demographics, that it very closely mimicked the demographics of the state of Virginia, both in population and socioeconomic levels.
Over the course of a 3-year project, the school received television sets for each classroom, 132 new computers, and an electronic classroom, which opened the door for distance learning. From that electronic classroom, lessons were videotaped and broadcast to schools around the country.
I'm the classroom teacher that remembers coming in 81 and 82 to Varina High School, making up my tests before I bought my typewriter that had correctable type, which was a very cool thing, I need to let you know. But before I did that, all my tests were written by hand. You made a mistake, then you had to use whiteout, so you had to paint that whiteout. You would just hope that it would paint, that you could put the whiteout on there, that you could write on top of it and do it so that the students could read it. From year to year, when we worked on exams, just think about that. An exam might be 15 to 20 pages. Well, if there's no computer, you have to start new every single time. So that's when teachers literally were cutting and pasting from year to year.
I think the fact that there was no technology in the classroom at that point. And I think the fact that we didn't have cell phones, which seems almost impossible now because we depend on them so much and so much a part of our day. We didn't have the technology to do grades or to do attendance, and we had to keep a blue book with all of the attendance, and then at the end of the year, everything you had to sit down and make sure that everything was correct.
In the 1990s, another big change came to Varina with the arrival of the Center for Communications.
The center started in 1995. We had one class at that time, and we had 18 incoming 9th graders. And we actually had 2 sophomores who entered the program at the same time. One thing that might be interesting so far as technology was concerned, when our program first started over 15 years ago, we bought, as part of our initial startup, our first digital cameras. And they were pretty heavy, and the resolution that you could actually get from that digital camera was very poor, and they were very expensive. They were $1,000 a piece. We now have cameras that you can buy for a couple of $100s that probably allows you the ability to take pictures, to import them, to manipulate them from everywhere from a couple $100s to something that's very high end, that's $600 or $700. So if you think, really, we're talking about over 15 years ago or so, that's how expensive and how limited the equipment and the technology was.
Today, the Center for Communications has a 3-camera television studio and 2 state-of-the-art computer labs, one for graphic design and one for video editing. Its newspaper, the Blue Devils Advocate, wins top honors every year from the Virginia High School League. Today, Varina High School is synonymous with football, but Varina's status as a football powerhouse didn't emerge until the 1990s.
So then when I started coaching back in 1986, I was always a soccer coach. And then in 1989, they asked me to join the football staff. So I joined football 1989 and been doing both sports since then.
I played on the first Varina AAA football team. We went to another level when we was AA. playing smaller schools, so it was tougher for us at the beginning. By my senior year, we didn't win the championship, but we was in every game, and we won the majority of our games. Beating Patrick Henry in 1987, they were number 4 in the state, and they put us on their homecoming. We pulled the game out on the last play of the game.
When I first got here, Coach Carter was the coach. I know we went 10-0 one year, couple of 7-3, couple of 6-4. But then when Coach Bullheller and Coach Chilcote got here and decided, hey, we're going to start doing this off-season stuff, that's when we started, being consistently with 8, 9, 10, 11 wins a year.
I believe I got there 88 and 89 and graduated in 91. I played football, basketball, track for all 4 years. Football is my favorite sport. The way practice was held was 2-a-days, which means you basically get dropped off in the morning and you stayed all day.
Practices were rough. We had 2-a-days. At some time it was, close to 100 degrees. We didn't get water breaks every 5 minutes like they do today.
Regulations that are in place that weren't in place back then, all the better the game. I mean, for example, what you guys call Lucky Charm was actually my best friend. I watched him, go through his ordeal on the practice field. I was here that day. It was very troublesome, but, practice, they were what they were, but we produced, wins.
When it came to football, players not only had to endure long practice days, but they also had to abide by military-style regulations that were meant to keep the players' minds solely on the game.
With football, we really couldn't be pretty. You couldn't wear the wristbands or the sleeves.
Like when we were here, it was straight blue socks and black cleats. Now I'm seeing cats with Nikes and wristbands and visors and all that stuff. Our coaches weren't going for that.
We just created so many different memories. It's hard to, just say one, but it's definitely fun watching the program grow and know that we were a part of the beginning of that.
The past 2 decades at Varina can be summed up in one word: technology. From computers to social media, the newest innovations are keeping learning fresh and interesting for Varina students and teachers.
The ability to collaborate more between students has grown exponentially over the last 12 years.
In the year 2000, Varina had overhead projectors and computer labs. But in 2001, a revolution occurred with Henrico County's Laptop Initiative.
Mark Edwards was the superintendent at the time, and he gave everyone he handed us a computer and shook our hands, and we were all excited to get it. And so it was a really big deal.
We use it on a daily basis inside the classroom and outside of the classroom to promote them to use their language.
Technology has evolved from heavier laptops and desktops to now lighter weight computers. Eventually we'll see tablets.
Hardware in the form of laptops was just the beginning. Software applications have empowered students and teachers. Social networking is also becoming a powerful teaching tool.
With social networks, it helps us analyze and also synthesize information and put it out there in our own words. Twitter, we're encouraging Twitter use more through announcing things and promoting things through our school, to actually getting teachers to safely use it with their students in the classroom.
I would like to see Skype used in the classroom on every kind of level possible.
Having that new technology keeps it fresh, not just for them, but for me too.
I definitely think that technology has changed the academic standards because it's putting more responsibility on the students.
Athletes who worked hard at Varina during decades past have returned to give back to the sports that gave so much to them. With a wealth of knowledge and experience, they're coaching today's athletes to new heights.
One of the reasons why we have so many former athletes on our staff, I think our former players just love Varina. Varina has meant a lot to them. It helped them to get to where they went to after high school, and they want to give back. I mean, they realize what some of their coaches did for them while they were here, and they want to do the same for the athletes coming behind them.
I was at Varina from 1999 to 2003. I played football, basketball, and I ran track. This year, for the seniors that graduated,
these were the guys that these are my first ever kids that I've ever coached in my life. And it was fun to see these guys being successful as they were, to make it to a regional championship game, to do all the things that I told them that was done when I was here. And it was fun seeing them experience that and just experiencing it with them. That's one of the greatest memories I've had since I've been back.
I attended Varina from 1999 to 2003. Sports I played at Varina was basketball. My favorite memory will probably be playing the Holland Springs games, particularly during my junior year. We had some success against them during my junior year. And the games were a lot more closer during my junior year. So.
I was at Varina between 1998 and I graduated in 2002. I was a cheerleader. I did sideline cheerleading and competition cheerleading. One of my favorite memories of Varina is just cheerleading on the sidelines. I really loved being at the games. We had a great football team, just like we do now. We went to state playoffs a few times when I was here, so that was a lot of fun, going to playoff games and cheering for the football team and being a part of that.
I always wanted to come back and coach at Varina because I just wanted to help kids like myself. Well, I see kids like myself in the program now, and I wanted to help them get to college and understand what it takes, and let them know that you definitely need education and you need to be a hard worker during the season, and also after the season and before the season. So I just wanted to instill that hard work. And
Henderson was another player that came back. We talk about it a lot. We're great friends. We talk on a daily basis. And before he came back, I kind of talked him into coming back. He came back a year after me. My whole pitch was, come back, man. You get to give back and give him what we didn't have. I gave him the same pitch that I felt like I had to give myself. He had a chance to come back, coach basketball, and just give the kids something that he didn't have as a basketball player.
I just had a knack. Well, me wanting to be a coach, I just had a knack for the game. I always felt like I was a step ahead of my opponents as far as knowing what they were going to do. So I always thought the game as a player, and I felt like my knowledge that I gained from the coaches that I have been taught by, I can use that as a coach.
I think it's that a lot of players come back to coach because we really just enjoyed our experience so much as student athletes, and I think a lot of other players as well really want to come back and give that experience to students, help them achieve the same experience that we had when we were in school.
Over the last 50 years, the Varina student body has evolved into a diverse and vibrant group of young people. Varina High School has seen 4 sports teams grow to 14, has seen beepers evolve into iPhones, and has seen the community move from rural to suburban.
I came to Varina during the 2004-2005 school year. One of the most unique things about Varina's culture is just the diversity between not just having white and black students. I was more so surprised of just like Varina, the whole community to me was like something you read out of Sweet Valley High. Like we had nothing like that. I do remember as a student here back in the late 90s, we were not allowed to have cell phones on campus at all. Just comparing that situation to now where students are allowed to have cell phones on campus, they just have to be off and away.
In 2000, almost nobody had a cell phone. They were expensive and they were uncommon, they were very large, and now almost everybody has a cell phone.
Cell phones aren't the only advances in technology that have influenced Varina's culture. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram have changed how students communicate with each other.
Biggest changing factor in the social life at Varina is social network, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. That's just changed the way the kids interact.
2000, there was little to no social media. I don't even know if there was a MySpace yet. But in the years since 2000, the social media has provided a platform for students to interact with one another virtually, and that's the main form of communication for them.
Well, I think what's really good about social media is that you can meet new people from other schools, and you can promote yourself and let the world know what type of person you are, and you can just find out about events that's going on. For my recruiting, well, I'm a football player, so college football coaches follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I promote my clothing line, Turned to Lifestyle, on Instagram.
50 years have brought great changes to Varina High School, but the most important things about Varina have stayed the same. Close ties to the community, a passion for sports, pride in a unique history, and a feeling of camaraderie like nowhere else in Henrico County.